My humble respect to Guru Mahan, Guru Kiran Sivasankaran, Guru Piranyo, fellow Jnanis. Today I'm going to continue with Mahan's chapter 24 on vision of God and the self. And how does one cognize the self or God, for that matter? And many people find it very, the concept is very abstract. They can't cognize it, and part of it is actually we saw in the previous satsang that we're seeing in the wrong place. We want to see and cognize God with our apparatus. We want to capture God in a kind of an object sense. The mind is so caught up in the object world that it is unable to cognize this very subtle subject called self, which is neither matter nor energy. So when the apparatus or when the mind is focused on the material world too much, you see that the mind is unable to cognize that self. And here we see that, there are four important doors that needs to open so that the mind is kind of illumined by the self. If at all the mind is to experience the self, what would that experience be? What would that cognition be of that mind being, being able to cognize this, seem to be very elusive self. And here it is that when the self, which is neither matter or energy, becomes, a core exploration of this mind through the, intensive introspection, contemplation, reflection, and meditation, the mind slowly gets glimpses of that self. And slowly we see that the mind's door to this self, this subject, this subtle body starts opening up. And we see that as our focus moves away from that material world to a more spiritual and subtle, substratum, we see that we get glimpses of this experience. And I spoke about some of the glimpses. So we see that there are four important doors that as we take this journey, we realize that it's closed. For ordinary people, it's closed. That's why they're unable to cognize this self. And slowly we saw that in the last few satsangs, that there are ways to open up the doors. And this is where the Mahans and the great saints and sages and the prophets devised methods to open this door. Every door has a password, and some people have, naturally the doors are open for them. Others would have to work hard, and others start looking for, instructions on how to open the door, get the password to open the door. Some of us are lucky that we get our gurus who have gone through this path, teach us how to unlock this door through, acquiring various methods, or what I call the password, right? To open these doors. Once it's open, you become more aware of this, subtle substratum that is powering everything. So in this, we spoke about the last few satsang, how the doors open through introspection, contemplation, reflection, meditation, and that self emanates itself in many, many manifestations. And I showed how that when you're sitting down quietly, the mind becomes quiet and silent. There's a sense of focus. These are all qualities of that self. We covered about 30 qualities that we get glimpses of. An ordinary person's mind cannot be silent. It's difficult for them to attain that silence. But through the grace of the Guru, through the guidance of the Guru, you practice meditation, you practice an introspection, slowly you get a sense of silence and serenity, and that sets off all the other, it opens up all the other doors, what I call the supreme experiences we get, right up to the final one, where we get the Summa comes to unconditional joy and happiness. And we also see that, we have that sustaining power. So I spoke about this, how the doors slowly open as we shift from outside to inside. Today, I want to speak about the second door opening up, which is actually the the enlightening experiences, the glimpses of enlightenment you get, glimpses of understanding, glimpses of awareness, glimpses of the expansion that is spoken about by many, many great saints and sages. So we see that, this enlightening experiences starts taking place when something happens. Remember the first door, when it opens, you get the silence and a whole range of qualities that we get, we nurture. And slowly we see that something very interesting happens, which is captured beautifully by Rumi. Rumi says that once you conquer yourself, selfish self, you see that the first door slowly makes you become more spiritual, more divine, more subtle. And we see that slowly that selfishness, that ego starts disappearing, right? And what he says here is that this is exactly happens to many people who are practicing. Before you're very hard and so on, the mind becomes more gentler and more softer. He says that all darkness will change to light. All the ignorance starts, illuminating. We see that what we did not understand, we understand things. The qualities that we had, the crude qualities, become more and more refined. Our thoughts become more refined, our speech becomes more refined, and slowly we see that, the second door starts opening and more doors starts opening up. And what does the enlightening experiences happens? Before, your mind is so focused on material things, you know, all kinds of complex relationships and so on. But when we start practicing, life becomes more simpler. All the complexity disappears. And we start getting glimpses of that enlightening experiences, which is what the second door is. A sense of illumination, a sense of, lightness that takes place. So what happens here is that something very interesting happens, is that before you didn't care about anything. People said things, you take it for granted. Now you start, something, is invoked in you, that you have an inquiring mind. You want to know why things are the way it is. You don't take things for granted. Before, somebody said, go and do this or pray this way, you just did it. But now you start asking, why are we doing it? What's the logic behind this? So the mind becomes, searching for this knowledge, searching for this truth. That's glimpses of that self. The mind is starting to understand what that self is and is starting to inquire and deepen the mind. This is something very interesting that happens to most people. You see that when you start seeing what you read before, you used to read, things that are not so great, not so exciting. But now you see that the kind of things you read, the things that you listen, becomes much more deeper, because you want to have a deeper understanding that actually leads to a chain of other qualities. The second one is that when the mind starts inquiring, this is the part that is very important, because in the scriptures, and even in one sees in oneself, that there's an expansion that takes place. And something very interesting happens. The explorer in you comes out. It's no more that you're just riding this journey called life. You want to explore. What is this? Why am I experiencing this? Why is the body changing this way? Why is my mind? So a lot of the whys come out, and the search for these answers starts taking place. And you see that you have a lot of questions, very deep questions, and you see that you start exploring that answer. You don't just leave it at the question. You start pursuing this, thinking about it. This is also part of that expansion that takes place within ourselves. And that leads to the next one, which is expansion in the horizon. So, the inquiring mind, the explorer, starts now, giving us, better understanding. Our knowledge base becomes more expanded. Our intellectual, bank becomes much more wider and deeper. And you see that you can relate to things, you can make sense to things. And this is part of that self-realization process, that, hey, I understand things better. But this is the part where, you see in one of the scriptures, when the disciple is supposed to do a particular task, he says, I cannot do it. The Guru says, you're experiencing karpanya dosha, shrunkenness of the mind. But when you evoke this, introspection, contemplation, reflection, meditation, you see the mind inquires, explores, and expands. And you see that things become more clearer, what the purpose of life becomes more clearer. And this leads to a much more elevating experiences. You don't go through that ups and downs, swings, very high ups and downs. You get a sense of experiences that are not tied to the material world. As in the earlier one, we saw that we got the summa, it comes from unconditional joy and happiness. And that actually lifts the spirit, lifts the mind, lifts the intellect to operate beyond an ordinary field of, operations or experience. So you get this inspirational experiences, inspirational thoughts, inspirational feelings that gives you a kind of a really a blissful feeling, that elevated feeling, right? You yourself can feel your tejas, and the people around you could also feel the energy and the force. And you feel so nice and pristine, right? So you get this glimpses. This is what you're experiencing, is the glimpses of that self that's giving you that blissful, experiences. Something very interesting happens, that you don't question anything anymore, in the sense that you have this why am I here, you have this enthusiasm, you have this energy in you that really drives you, enthusiasm for life. And because, not surprising, because you're inquiring and you're exploring. Normally when you're an explorer, a good explorer has fantastic enthusiasm, wanting to learn new things, wanting to chart new frontiers, wanting to know the unknown, right? So that the unknowns become the known. So that, as time goes on, the, the, the percentage of unknowns starts shrinking. And that, you're continuously inspired, you're continuously and, you have to be enthusiastic of what you do. Everything that you do, from your roles and responsibilities, you're enthusiastic, you're always positive. And you see that, before I was not like that, now I feel this way. Where does this come from? It comes from the self. It's actually glimpses of that self that is just rushing out like a light. In the darkness, the light just rush out. If you see in the picture on the right-hand side, this is exactly how the mind is. It just becomes so enthusiastic, right? Whether people come or not, people do, you will continue to do it. You also attain something called endurance, right? An ordinary human being goes through various cycles, and you see that they start off very well, and then after a while it fizzles out because of fatigue, because of a whole range of other things. But you see something very interesting happens, that when you start doing the introspection, contemplation, reflection, and meditation, your endurance to go through something intensifies. You're able to see the journey through. You're able to stay focused, but also ensure that you complete your journey, you complete the task. And there are times that what would take people 8-9 hours, you can do it much more quickly. But more importantly, you can do it more intensively. And you have that mental stamina, the intellectual stamina to go through the full journey and beyond. So somehow you see that you have that intellectual endurance, knowing what to do. You have the mental endurance, you don't get tired. And the body too doesn't get tired. The body, yes, the body needs rest, but you're able to, continue that until you finish your task. So the body also builds that stamina as the mind and the intellect. So somehow I as I'm aging now, I feel that my endurance is much more higher. I can do many more things. I can multitask, and so on. So, and that comes from actually that, that introspection, contemplation, reflection that reveals that self, the mind that is kind of immersed in the self, acquire that endurance. When the mind has the stamina, it pulls the body to gives the body that endurance too. And something very interesting also happens is that tasks now become effortless, right? Things that you take you 8 or 9 hours will take you maybe 8 minutes, because the mind is organized in such a way that it's powered by the divine, divinity, the mind becomes quiet, the bandwidth intensifies or expands and deepens. We see that what would take us a long time, what would take us, we need to have a lot of mental capacity becomes more and more effortless, and that's why I say that when you start meditation, yes, initially it's tough, but as time goes on, it becomes easier. Like every other task, now when we start, we need to put in a lot of effort. After a while, it becomes effortless. And this is something that, it comes from that self itself because it is not touched by the forces of karmic forces. The karmic forces actually sometimes draws us down, right? Because of cause and effect, frictions, and so on. But as the mind, becomes one with the self, we see it becomes frictionless. It becomes less impacted by the cause and effect. Hence, we see that things become more lighter and more easier to transition. We feel energized, as I mentioned, the endurance. We feel more powered, and we get a sense of things that so you become like a marathon runner, right? You have that endurance, you're using that energy effectively, you're not wasting energy, you know your cardio, metabolic systems, everything is operating in harmony. So when the mind is in harmony, the intellect is in harmony, the body is in harmony, and the body is powered by this, you see, so you feel so refreshed and energized, always glowing, always ready to take on the world, and that light that is just coming out. The other important thing is that the seamless integration I spoke about starts making us understanding the nature, the environment around us more, in many sense, that we become more nature centric. That's number one. The environment, we are conscious of how the environment is interrelated with us. So this is the part where we become more seamlessly integrated, right? The other aspect of the environment is that we are also conscious that we have an impact on the orbit around us, and the orbit around us also have an impact on us, right? So there are times that we are in the orbit that may have a lot more negative impact, negative people, and so on. We're conscious of that. At the same time, we see that, we carry with us the divine orbit. The environment around us will start transforming when our mind is more divine and our mind is more pristine, our mind is more calmer. So we see that while one is at the nature center, we become more nature oriented. We, all our thoughts, our, experiences, our actions become more and more aligned to nature, the environment that we live in. That is why you see that great Mahans and saints have their monastery or monk with the monastery and the ashrams in very secluded place, very nature centric, so that they see that symbiotic relationship between nature and themselves. But also, they also see that the environment, the current environment, the orbit that they're very, very perceptive to the emotions and the feelings of people. And there are times that an ordinary person may be impacted by it, but the Mahans and great saints actually using their, mental capacity and capabilities and also their divine vibrations, they're able to transform that environment within themselves. This is the relationships become more and more harmonious. Similarly, as we meditate and go deeper, our relationship with nature and the things around us, the people around us, become more and more harmonious. And there's a sense of ecstasy, wow, you really enjoy life. Sometimes people ask me, as you should take this journey, do you have to give up this, give up that, all those things, right? Not really, though. Actually, when you take this path, you enjoy life, really well. You experience life in a different light. You, as I said, you become an explorer, right? That the ecstasy of knowing, the ecstasy of being in connection, having a divine relationships, divine communication. You see that it gives you a kind of a nice feeling, and that's why I always say, sometimes people say, well, Why don't, why is it that great saints and sages look so blissful? And it's because of that internal ecstasy that they experience, as what Swami says, "Summa Irkum Sugam." So these are words that actually start showing up. You read, you reflect, you see in many scriptures, how the great saints and sages are in a state of ecstasy, you know, in the state of kind of a bliss. That's what it means. Right? There's also a sense of equanimity, the samatva, the oneness, that, are not perturbed by anything. While you have that, blissful feeling, it kind of, gives you a sense of, equanimity, not being impacted by things around you. You integrate everything, both the sukha and dukkha, and it becomes a foundation for our development. It becomes the fuel for our enlightenment, enlightened living. So sense of calm, you're not impacted by, before you were impacted by what people said, or now you're not impacted by it. It's okay. They're saying maybe they don't understand, but it's okay. So you have that, all will be good, right? So that kind of sense of serenity and calmness and the coolness comes in. This is also glimpses of that self. You'll see the transformation taking place. And you also see that sense of elegance that emanates from you. And you don't have to tell people, but you can experience, wow, there's this beauty of living. There's an elegance of life that is, embedded in me. And you see that you can experience, you are the first experiencer of that divine quality, that elegance in you, the awesomeness in your mind, the way the mind thinks, the way the mind experiences things, the way the mind transforms everything into a blissful and enlightening experience. You'd be the first one to know. Ah, it's not a borrowed idea, or it's not a kind of thing that you read. You experience this. And you say, wow, how elegant it is, that self in me. And the mind is experiencing that elegance. And slowly over time, you see that others start seeing that too. Wow, they see the value in what you're saying, or the value in the deeds that you take. And they want to associate with someone who's enlightened, right? Because that spiritual osmosis starts giving people the positivity, that, the sense of oneness, the sense of calmness, you know. And I've been in the presence of many Mahans and great saints, and you can see the difference where you actually experience the awesome elegance that they have, that gives you that a sense of oneness. It rubs on you too. You go with a lot of trouble in your mind. When you see them, it all melts. So this is the qualities that you experience with the enlightened ones, or a place, a spiritual abode that you go to. But now you start experiencing from yourself, all the issues and the challenges you have just dissolves, right? A sense of awesomeness that emanates from you. You also experience this eternality. You're not caught up by time. People rush, and you see that's okay. Do everything in good time. And this is so important to the earlier part that I said, which is, it becomes effortless. Time changes for you, right? What takes many people a lot of time, now time actually slows down for you. You see that people are rushing to do things. You become more calmer. You don't rush. You look at things more deeper, and that deepness leaves that memory and enables the intellect to understand. And next time when you're doing something, it becomes more easier. It becomes more effortless. So you see that for people who are practicing deeply, all this explorer, effortless, energized, all this, because you see that time starts warping for the enlightened. It slows down, and ultimately time just becomes still. Time just stops, right? And the mind, boom, realizes that, wow, as long as the sukha dukkha is there, as long as time is there, we're always caught by the change. And you see that this time slowly slows down, gaps forming in your mind where between thoughts, even that stops. Ultimately, boom, you experience that self. So this eternality, you experience that eternality while you're still awake in this material world. And this is what, not just in meditation or in deep sleep, but you experience this. The whole world is, moving, at least seemingly moving, but you are just an observer. And finally, we see that a quality that starts emerging from the mind. And this is also captured in many of the scriptures, the excellence in how one nurtures thoughts, how one understands the thoughts, how one dissolves the thoughts, and get that wisdom from the thoughts. The excellence when the thoughts, the mind and the thoughts become excellent, the mind becomes excellent. When the mind becomes excellent, it nurtures back, reinforces that excellence thought. And you see the thoughts influence the words that come out of our mouth. We become more gentler, more kinder, more refined, more deeper. We're able to articulate our ideas better with simplicity, not complexity, right? Things become more clearer because the mind is the sense of clarity. So we see that the mind attains the excellence, the par excellence. In Vivekachudamani, he says it's said that it's about sarvadakshina. The mind becomes par excellence. Not surprising because it is the self, it is the divinity. It has to be par excellence. The mind recognizes that when I'm absorbed in this par excellence, I become par excellence. The thoughts become par excellence. My words become par excellence, and my actions become par excellence. And the outcome and the impact become par excellence. And you start seeing, wow, good things happen to you, start happening, whether in jobs or relationships or, whatever you touch, it just blooms. And this is what you start seeing, hey, before things never happen, before or I have a dark cloud every time there's problems, you see that all that starts disappearing and you see new opportunity starts emerging. You feel more peaceful, you feel, more, you feel recognized. People feel that, a sense of closeness to you, your relationships improve. You see that, suddenly there's a transformation that starts taking place. The relationship with your spouse or children, family, your neighbors, your friends, in your office, all that starts transforming. And that is why, great saints say that don't change the world, know the self, and everything will align, with excellence. And this is what this great Mahan's teachings I learned when the second door opened. It pushed me to become more inquiring. The scientist in me, the philosopher in me, the curious explorer in me was awakened. I wanted to read not just Mahan's book. I read Mahan's book. I read the Bhagavad Gita. I wanted to extract that essence. Read the Vivekachudamani, read the Bible, read many scriptures, and all the words just jump out. These words just jump out. And when they jump out, it's actually revealing that self in me that is recognizing all these words that were spoken about by the Mahans and the great saints and the prophets. They too experienced this. They too attained the self-realization, and their perspective of self-realization was all these qualities that they experienced, that they verbalize it, they put it in books, they put it in experience, put it in the actions. And they were the walking self or divinity. And this is what, the secrets of this knowledge that Mahan has left us, and all the other great saints and the prophets have left us, right? When we nurture these qualities, and when we understand what these qualities are, when we can put a word to it as best as possible, a good approximation to that word, and then that word becomes part of our memory, and we can access that, and whenever that word comes in, we know this is a reflection of the self. And the more we introspect, contemplate, reflect, and meditate upon it and put it to practice, we see that the mind, the vocabulary, starts transforming the mind. And there's an endogenous relationship that takes place. And ultimately, you see that, what you think, what you do, what you breathe, what you live, all is actually that self itself. So, and slowly you see that, as what Rumi said, the light starts emerging, right? And you start seeing that you transition from that selfish state to the selfness state, to the selfless state, and finally to the self-realized state. So this is what these great teachings are. And next week, I'll speak about the third door opening up, and subsequently the remaining doors. When all four doors open up, you will experience God realization. You'll experience the divinity, which I'll cover in the coming subsequent classes. Sandosham.